wheel bearing in the freezer? Who put this in here? That's gonna be a mistake. So you've determined that you need a wheel bearing. Whether you have a howling noise or you have excessive play. Whether you have a hub assembly style or you have a press-in style, you can get those parts at 1aauto.com. Doing a hub assembly style is fairly cut and dry, and there's not many special tools you need, just basic hand tools. With a press-in style, you're gonna need to get creative and use some special tools. Most of you are gonna have to remove the entire assembly when you're doing pressed-in bearings. You're not gonna have special tools like this where you could use it on the car. This slides over here, this goes through the hub, and then you have special adapters where you can press it through. Removing the knuckle from the car overall is really easy. There's just a lot to it. You need to remove the brakes, the caliper, the rotor, the axle. You gotta pull the axle nut off. You'll have to remove the tie rod end, if there's an upper ball joint and also a lower ball joint, and then the whole knuckle assembly will slide out. If you have any specialty tools, you wanna use those to get this taken apart, or if you have a press, you can set it up in a press. Overall, you're really not gonna have those specialty tools. You're gonna have to do it a different way, getting creative. You wanna support this whole knuckle assembly. Basically, this hub is gonna come out here, but we need to support in these areas right here. Some important things to stay away from is where the brake caliper bracket is. The metal is really thin right here, and if you support anything right there, you're gonna break it. Also, way out here, if you were to put this on a block of wood or something, the metal is thinner here. As you're hammering it out, you're probably gonna bend the knuckle, and then you're gonna have alignment issues, so you don't wanna do that. So support it as close to here as possible. You can use some metal rods and get those on each side, and then you can support that. What we're trying to do is get the hub out, and what we need to do is it's pressed in, so we need to push just on this area to push it down. So we can't support obviously on the hub surface right here. We need to support beside it, and we need something to push down. You can't have some kind of adapter like this size. Obviously that's not gonna push just the hub out. So that's what we are looking for. So if you find a socket or something that will work in there, that will be good. You definitely, one thing you don't wanna do is take another hammer and hit it with a hammer. You can splinter the hammer and you can have shrapnel, and it's just gonna be dangerous, so don't do that. Take something like this. You can use a punch and just try to punch it down. Just make sure everything's good. Yeah, it's starting to move. Using a hammer is not the best way to do this. It's not ideal. We did mar up the surface a little bit on the back side of the hub using this little adapter here. If we had used a socket that was a little bit bigger, that probably would have been a little better. We wouldn't have messed up that surface area at all. But the bearing itself is going to separate like this. You have a race on this side that we're gonna have to remove from this hub if we're gonna reuse it. And then we still need to take the bearing out of the knuckle. Now we need to remove the snap ring. Now on different vehicles, there's gonna be a snap ring on this side or the other side. Don't try to press the bearing out with the snap ring still in. You're just gonna cause some damage. You're gonna break the snap ring. So get some snap ring pliers and just squeeze the snap ring and just try to get it out. Be careful, because they do go flying. Most of the time you can reuse the snap ring if you make sure it's nice and clean. It's always recommended to replace it. With the snap ring out, we know the bearing is gonna come out this way. So what we need to do is from the back side, hammer it down that way. Find something that's the same size of the bearing and try to hammer it out that way. Now, if you did not take the ABS sensor out or the wheel speed sensor, you can see right here, you're gonna end up breaking that. So make sure you take that ABS sensor out. To start out, I'm just going to put this on a flat surface. We just want to get the bearing started, and we're just going to use one of these bearing seal installers removers. This is definitely not the ideal tool to be doing this, but you got to do what works. Let's see if we can get it to budge. There's no way this is going to work. We're going to need something stronger than this. Now we're going to try using an air hammer. Now again, this isn't the best tool to be doing this, but we're going to try it. It is starting to budge though. Another thing you can try is a ball joint press. You can get creative with some different types of adapters. Try to get it to line in there. Depending on the type of vehicle, if it was a smaller setup, this would work a little bit better. It's not going to work for us, so I'm going to go back to this. Hammer it the rest of the way out. So it's almost to the edge. That's pretty good. There it is. Yeah, the bearings came right out. As you can see, it's very difficult to just get the bearing out. So it's important to note that when you go to put the new bearing in, you absolutely want to make sure you're putting it in the correct way. There is, on the back side, on certain vehicles, you may have a tone ring, which is a magnet, and that works with the ABS. So you want to make sure that is going in the correct direction. For this vehicle, the tone ring goes down. So you want to do that. When you put the bearing in itself, you want to make sure before you put the hub on that you take this off. Otherwise, if you were to install this into the bearing, once you get halfway, if you say, oh, I forgot to take that off, you're going to damage the brand new bearing. So don't do that. Another thing with the bearing, if you put it in and it's crooked, it starts going in crooked, you're going to cause some damage to the bearing. I'm just going to show you some examples with the old bearing because I don't want to ruin the new bearing. If you were going to install the bearing such as this, and you took a cup that was too small, it doesn't cover the outside of the bearing itself, and you hammer it in, you're just going to destroy the bearing. It's going to pop out the other side, the race, just like on the hub, and it's going to ruin the bearing. Even if you go to put this back together and you say, oh yeah, that's fine, it's really not going to work. You're going to end up with a howling noise in the end or some looseness, so don't do that. Now we're going to take this race off the hub right here. One of the quickest ways to do this would be heating this up with a torch and letting it just fall while you're spinning it. But not everyone has hot torches that are going to work with that. Just a little bit of propane or MAP gas sometimes doesn't do the job. More people have a cutoff wheel, so what we're going to do is cut this off. And what you want to be careful is not hitting the center of the hub too much. You can gouge it a little bit, but you just want to be careful not to get too deep. So we're just going to make a slice in it. A little too far there. Should be okay though. Now we want to try to crack it with a punch. And there it is. Slides right off. Got a nice crack in it. Try to hammer it off. And there it is. So gouge it up a little bit, but that's just superficial. It's not really going to cause any issues with the hub. It will be fine. Now when you're ready to install the new bearing, there's a couple different ways you can do this. You want to install it into the knuckle, line it up, make sure you have that ABS tone ring going down if you have that. And then you can always take the old bearing, line that up, and then press it in with a press. You want something pushing on the outside circumference of the bearing. You don't want to be pushing in the middle. Don't ever do that because like we've said before, it's just going to go through. It's going to ruin the bearing. You can also use a tool like this that you get the right size on the outside and then the right size on the inside. And as you tighten this down, it's just going to pull the bearing right into the knuckle. That's how most people can do it. We're going to do something a little different, a little trick. What you can do is take the bearing itself and put the bearing in the freezer. Now, metal shrinks when it's cold, so that's going to shrink the bearing down just slightly. It's not going to be significant. And you could always use some dry ice. That's going to get it even colder. And then what we want to do is heat up the knuckle. You don't want to heat it up above 400 degrees. You just want to heat it so that it expands a little bit, because when metal heats up, it expands. If you put this in the oven, you got to be aware of the rubber bushing, or you could always put it in a barbecue grill. You just want to put some kind of tin foil down below, but we're going to just focus on heating this area with a torch. So that'll make the hole a little bigger. This bearing will be a little bit smaller, and it will slide in easier than just trying to put it in when the metals are the same temperature. And it gets started. All right, I am going to use the press a little bit. Help it along. And that's all the way down. There you go, it's in there. It's all the way down. You can double check the backside, make sure there's no gap. There's no gap. So doing that trick helped out a little bit, but it's not significant. Sometimes you can get it so that the bearing just drops right in. One thing you want to keep in mind is don't get the knuckle cherry red. You don't want to heat it up too much. That's going to compromise the integrity of the steel. Next, some people forget to put the snap ring in and just start putting the hub on. And once you get that hub on, you're not going to be able to remove it. So don't do that. Make sure you put the snap ring on next. And that's also going to help you determine whether the bearing's all the way down. So we'll do that now. It's always a good idea to replace the snap ring if it's not in good condition. Just line it up. And it went in all the way around, so we know the bearing's in. It's good. We can put the hub on. Now, the thing about the heating it up and cooling it down, you can't do the same trick with the hub itself. You can't put this in the freezer because you cannot heat up the bearing because you have seals in there, and that's going to ruin the seals, so you don't want to do that. So now we'll line this up just like that. On the back side, we want to support just the center part of the bearing. If we support the outside of the bearing, you're going to push the center part of the bearing in. So we don't want to do that. So what you can do is take the race from the old bearing and just line that up in the middle there. And then we'll support that. And if you're using a press, you can, stack it up a little bit. But we're just going to use that same tool that we used to put the bearing in and just tighten it down. And it's all the way down. Loosen it up, take the tool off. It's all the way on, and it spins nice. Look at the back side. It's exactly where it's supposed to be. Now you want to tighten down the spindle nut. You don't want to just take your impact and send it home like this. You want to snug it down slightly, and then you want to torque it. It's very important to torque this properly. If you don't, you're going to cause that bearing to wear out prematurely. So what you can do is lower the vehicle down, take a pry bar, get in between the lug studs so the whole assembly doesn't turn, and then you want to find the proper torque for this vehicle. It's 181 foot-pounds. Set your torque wrench and tighten it down. You could also put this whole assembly back together, put the brakes on, just having the nut loose. Put your wheel on with the center cap out and torque it that way, but you want to keep in mind, you don't want too much pressure on the wheel when you do that. You don't want to lower it all the way down, or you're going to mess up the torquing sequence. On some vehicles, you're going to have a little notch like this, where you just take a punch and just peen it over. You don't have to go nuts with it, just a little bit. That's just going to prevent the nut from loosening up. So those are some common installation mistakes that most people make when installing pressed-in wheel bearings, and the right way to do it. If you need wheel bearings for your vehicle, make sure you click the link in the description, head over to 1aauto.com. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you subscribe to our channel, ring the bell, turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. Whoops. Whoa. That's gonna be a mistake.
Do it and then
More?
close the door.
All right. That's gonna be a mistake.